Hi Winederlusters, and in this episode we're off to the Bellarine Peninsula. Welcome to the Winederlust podcast. My name's Jeanene and I run a wine events business in Canberra. But my real passion is travel, and my bucket list is to travel to every wine region in the world. In this series I'll be exploring some regional Aussie wine destinations. I'll give you some tips whether you're planning a romantic getaway, a girls' weekend, or you're dragging the kids along. Pour yourself a glass and let's get exploring. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're talking about today, the Winederlust people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Did you know Victoria's first commercial vintage was produced by Swiss migrants in 1845? And by the 1860s, Geelong was the most significant wine region in Australia by both its size and its prestige by exporting wines to Europe. Unfortunately, an outbreak of phylloxera halted all of this in about 1875, and it was nearly 100 years later until wine production recommenced in the region. So Geelong is about an hour southwest of Melbourne by the coast. The Geelong Wine Region has three distinct parts: the Surf Coast around Anglesea and Torquay, Moorabool Valley around Bannockburn, and the Bellarine Peninsula, which we're talking about today. This region has only been on my radar the past few years. It's about a half an hour drive from the city of Geelong, is very pretty and has some amazing views. So what wines to try? It is cool climate, the soil is like a rich black basalt and it gets the maritime breeze, but it's quite sheltered by the Port Phillip Bay. Being cool climate, it's known for its Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and its medium bodied Shiraz. The Bellarine Peninsula has the most cellar doors. There's about 16 in the area at the moment. One of the first to grow grapes in the region was Bellarine Estate Wines. I met up with Julian, the winemaker there. His parents were the ones that started the estate. We met at his winery and he kindly showed me around, driving around the vineyard, visiting the winery, seeing all the production where the magic happens, and the cellar door. So you're going to hear lots of different background sounds depending on where we are. Julian is passionate about the whole process. He loves tending to the vines, as good fruit equals good wine. And as you'll hear, they also have a gin and rum range too. Please welcome Jeanene Kennedy from Bellarine Estate Wines. So we're at Bellarine Estate and I'm with Julian, the winemaker, and he's driving me up the vineyard. So how many acres have you got here?
So there's 100 acres of property in total and 30 acres under vine. It's majority Pinot Noir, Chardonnay and Shiraz. Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are the two varieties that most people at least come to the region for. I think Shiraz, however, is probably the best one, I guess. So you get really nice savoury styles of Shiraz. They're not over the top. We try in particular to keep the alcohol a little bit lower on them, so they're not big, overly extracted Shirazes. Yeah, and so you'll see a few makers around here actually label them as Syrah to try and really get that point of difference across. We stuck with Shiraz on our labelling. While we're a Chardonnay Pinot region, the Shirazes are the wines that we typically get the best ratings for.
Really?
We've got a little bit of Viognier here too. So this is.
And you've been growing that for a long time. I saw in your cellar door that you had wines all the way back to 99 on display there.
I think 99 was our very first vintage Chardonnay. I don't know that we produced any reds in the 99 vintage. I think that was 2000 was the first for reds for us. The Viognier, this block here is the last planted block. So this is early 2000s, this stuff here. Well, we've actually for a long time made a Viognier as a standalone variety. The last few years we haven't done it, and doing it again this vintage, however, doing it on skins, so trying to make a bit of a point of difference.
And a bit that texture as well. That'd be lovely.
It's a beautiful variety, I think, on its own, but just very hard for the general consumer. It's the sort of the going joke is anything that starts with a V is nearly impossible to sell. So
we can't say it properly.
All those ones, yeah. And you'd be amazed how many people in the cellar door are exactly that. They'll stay away from it because they purely don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah. They'll point at it on the list and stuff like that, and you can see that they're awkward about it. And so it's
The people are relaxed,
unfortunate,
aren't
but
they? They're not going to give them a hard time. And,
oh, no, we
exactly.
don't. I don't have an issue with it, but you can see that people
a bit nervous.
are nervous about it. So, but yeah, give it a bit of a point of difference.
And you're second generation here, so your parents have been here for a while. Obviously, you said 99 was the first vintage.
Yep.
So they planted all this?
Yeah, planted it all in 96. So this was just cattle grazing before that.
So what made them go into grapes?
I think it was just a bit of a passion for them, and
Wow.
so they started off quite small with it, and then just started planting a little bit more and more and more, and it got a lot bigger than I think they ever first anticipated it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's at the size now where it's comfortable for us to still manage easily enough.
Did you always want to go into wine? Because you're growing up in a vineyard, did you maybe that would rub off a different way? Sort of thing?
I mean, I was always fascinated by it, but never really that into drinking wine, even from the years of like sort of 18 to 21 and stuff. I hadn't really been that big into it, and I think part of that is the whole it's so in your face all the time that you don't necessarily think of it that way. And then I was actually studying law after school.
Oh wow.
And I don't know, something just hit me, and I thought, you know what, this just isn't for me. And opportunity came up for me to take over the winemaking here, and Mum and Dad said, well, you're welcome to do it, but if you're going to do it, then you need to go to Charles Sturt or Adelaide Uni and get the degree in that as well. And so, and I've loved it. I'm really glad of the decision of doing that. Particularly the vineyard aspect for me, I really like. I love being in the winery, but I mean, winemaking is sort of like short, sharp bursts, whereas the vineyard, you get that whole year experience. And being able to craft the wines from the very start. Because, I mean, it's the saying, it really does happen in the vineyard. If you don't get the grapes right, you can't make the product what you really want it to be.
Yeah.
It's our biggest planting is Chardonnay. So there's about 45 odd rows on this side, and then on the other side as it goes up the hill, there's 35 rows on that side.
And Chardonnay took a bit of a beating with the reputation-wise, but you found that now it's become back?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing more people willing to try it. There was a big stage there where it was just anything but Chardonnay. Won't even try it. And it was very difficult to get people to do that, because most people, like you say, were expecting it to be that big, over-the-top, my dad's style of Chardonnay.
Oh.
He loves that style, so it's very difficult for me to... And
keep him happy.
I'm sort of at the other end of the spectrum, so he gets a little bit frustrated sometimes when he tries the Chardonnays I've got going on. I go, oh, ever try this? I reckon it's amazing. He goes, oh, it's good, but it's very modern. And
so you make a special batch for Dad.
Yeah, I'll give any of the new oak, he gets to try all that stuff. But it's definitely starting to come back to fashion as more winemakers start to really be a bit more true to the variety and show the fruit more. They're a bit leaner, so less malo going on, and particularly picking malic cultures where you're not getting too much diacetyl production going on, so it's not overly buttery. And you've still got some freshness with the acid in there.
That sounds nice, yeah.
And then we've got some 114 and 115 clone Pinot Noir just interplanted in here. And then there's some Best's Old Block Shiraz here. So of our Shiraz, this is actually usually one of our best quality producers. We find this block here. Okay. It's a small little planting, but it does really well. And I think also because it's got a really nice aspect to it here with the slope and the sun that it gets. The 114, 115 here actually surprisingly crops reasonably heavy, so we have to be a little bit sort of careful with that one, how we prune it.
Well, I know there's just lots of different clones and that, but is there a taste difference that you can notice from the fruit of those two?
Yeah, certainly. So the 114, 115, we can't differentiate them through the block because it's just like this one is a 114, that's a 115. But definitely when you look at wines made off of this block as opposed to our D5 V12 or our MV6, you see very different wines. The D5 V12, and which we this year we've used exclusively for sparkling, you do have much lighter characters going on.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Supposed to be really light in colour, but because it's got this really vertical growth pattern to it, it actually gets really good sun exposure, where some of our other blocks are a little bit bushier, so the colour in the D5V12 actually comes up quite well,
Oh, right.
surprisingly enough. But you do get these lighter fruit characters. And I find particularly I like that pick that little bit earlier where it keeps that freshness going on. The MV6 is usually the best in terms of the depth of fruit that we get from it, and the acid's usually always quite good on it. Colour's not usually a problem. The 114, 115 block here, the fruit characters are fantastic. You're sort of somewhere in between the two with the D5V12 and the MV6, but we find sometimes a little bit light on colour because it does have reasonably vigorous growth in this block. So that's where we have to sort of try and be a little bit careful with our pruning and whatnot to try and make sure that we get plenty of sun getting into those grapes to get the colour up.
Yeah, of course. You're not far from the water here, are you?
Oh, no, I mean, so it's a southerly prevailing wind.
Yep.
And so Bass Strait's not far, it's, probably 15 k's I would have thought, to our south. And then Port Phillip, as you can see over here. So when you get the northerly breezes coming through on those really hot days, where Melbourne might be in the 40s, we might only be 35. The wind coming across the water just takes the heat right out of it. So both those aspects of water keep us really moderate in temperature. I mean, we're really lucky here in terms of we don't have the sort of three big ones. We don't have much issue with fire because there's not a lot of bushland close to us here, so smoke's not really ever a problem. We very, very rarely get hail. I mean, I say that, but 2 years ago we did get some hail. It wasn't enough to wipe us out, but it did. We reckon we lost probably 30% of the crop here. But when you consider the guys up in the Hunter that deal with it nearly every year, it's we're very lucky. I think in the 28 years that my parents have had this place, we've had the hail event like that twice. So we don't usually have to worry about that. And being so close to the water, we don't really get frost in spring either. So we've never had an issue with frost here. So it's a really good growing area.
So when your parents set up in the 90s, were they one of the first vineyards in the area?
Yeah, so on this little section of Bellarine you had Scotchman's Hill, Rod and Ann at Kilgore, which is just down McAdams Lane. They were here as well. Other than that, I don't know that there was much down this side. There was still, I think there was already some out in Geelong, like the Bannockburn side. Yep. But all sort of around that same sort of timeline. And it's really started to progress a lot down here now. Yeah. We've just had a recycled water line get put in down the main highway.
Oh, how wonderful.
So we've actually had access to that for a while because Scotchman's Hill put a line through our property because we're between two that they manage. Yep. And so we've had access to recycled water for quite a while now. So it's a very dry area here. Yeah. Typically, at least over the growing seasons. I mean, the last 3 years have been an exception, but usually that's the biggest issue here is water.
And then we checked out the distillery.
And that's our little still there. So we actually.
Oh yes, you've 30 acres.
Yeah. So over COVID, we purchased the still. Well, it was just pre-COVID, and then so we bought the still. Basically, it got here, and then COVID hit. And so our plan with that was to make gin, and that's what we've been doing. And so the brand name is 30 Acres Distillery, and it comes about because we've got 30 acres of vineyard. So for us, it's a really boutique style of gin making here. So it's all made from our grapes. We're not buying ethanol in at all. We're 100% producing it from grapes off the vineyard here. So we can obviously only make so much every year because we can only allocate so much to actually run through the still. It's done like your sort of standard gin, and then so far we've done two others. So we've done a Pinot Noir and a Shiraz gin. So what we did with the Pinot Noir gin, we actually used Pinot and distilled that, and then similar to what you might have seen with some of the other ones out there, we got fresh grapes the following vintage. And so rather than diluting the alcohol that came out of the still to make the gin, so when we do the gin, it goes through 3 times. First time it goes through, the wine essentially comes out as brandy spirit. It's around sort of 60-70% alcohol. We put it through a second time to get it up to our neutral, so up over 90%, because gin is really just flavoured vodka, so we've got to get it to that neutral spirit essentially. Then we dilute it back down. We do a cold maceration of the botanicals, so we cold macerate with like a tea bag style deal. That comes out and we run it through again, but we run it only to about that 70% alcohol again. So at that stage, you've got what we call the still strength gin. So to get to our traditional style product, it's just simply cut back down with water to the bottle strength.
Wow. Can I ask a really stupid question?
Yeah.
When does juniper berry
Yes,
go in there?
yeah. So
does that go in with the grapes?
Yeah,
or?
technically to be a gin, it has to have a predominant flavour of juniper. I mean, that's sort of bent a lot these days.
Okay,
I've had a
right.
lot of gins that certainly don't sort of show much juniper anymore. But yeah, so when we do the cold maceration, so after the second distillation, where we get it to neutral, we water it down, and that's where all the juniper and all of our other botanicals go in. So they cold soak.
Yep.
It gets lots of flavour out of there, and then when we run it through that third and final time, you still get all those beautiful flavours because we're coming out at a lower alcohol percentage, but it cleans up all the bitterness and astringency that you're getting from the soaking.
So you've got a restaurant on site as well, do you?
Yep. So the restaurant just back down there, we had it leased out for a long while. We've actually started it back up as American barbecue, so smoked meat. But yeah, we went to the American barbecue because my mum's actually originally from Texas.
Oh, is she? Oh, right.
And they met in the States. Dad's an electronic engineer by trade. I mean, that's what he did in at school. And when he finished university, he got a fellowship to work at a company called Rockwell. And my mum's dad, so my grandfather, was working there as well. And I think mum was doing a summer job or something there.
Oh, right.
And so they ended up meeting each other there.
Oh, gosh.
And
how wonderful.
eventually made it back
Fireworks
here.
and a winery. Wow. A cellar door for a great photo opportunity is at Oakdene. It's an upside-down house on the outside, and there are a few quirky things on site as well. But on the inside, it's much more traditional with a huge range of award-winning wines. This is one of the 2 properties that they have in the region, and I look forward to returning when the second one opens. I met General Manager Stephen Paul, who kindly showed me around the cellar door and the vineyard. Stephen is super knowledgeable about wines and is a recipient of the Len Evans Award. Enjoy my chat with Stephen Paul of Oakdene. We're at Oakdene Estate. I'm speaking with Stephen, who's the General Manager.
That's correct, yep.
And you're going to tell us the history of Oakdene.
History of Oakdene. Righto, we're going to have a walk if that's okay,
great.
so at least we can see things while we're talking. This property here is the original Oakdene Vineyard, as we call it. We're in Wallington, which is a small region on the Bellarine Peninsula, very close to Ocean Grove. Property is 230 acres.
Wow, that's quite big.
It is, yeah. But we only have 30 acres under vine. So we're looking at the original block here. 5 acres of Pinot Noir, 5 acres of Chardonnay in the middle, and 5 acres of Shiraz at the end. Planted in 2001, and this is the source block for our single vineyard Chardonnay, Pinot and Shiraz. So that's the Liz's Chardonnay, the Peter's Pinot Noir, and the William Shiraz. And they're probably, I guess, our benchmark wines. Geelong's largest holding of any variety is Pinot Noir at this stage, and followed by Chardonnay, followed by Shiraz, and they're the varieties that we think best suit the region. Yeah. And we're probably in a nice, unique sort of situation where there isn't that many places in Australia that are producing excellent Pinot Noir year on year. So you end up with quite small competition out there in the broader market, especially in Australia. So it's nice to have those up our sleeve. Looking to our left is our second block we planted in 2002. Majority of that is Sauvignon Blanc. You can sort of see cane pruning sort of coming up to halfway up the block. And then we've got more Shiraz. And again, referencing offline, that Shiraz block there is planted to the best clone, which is sourced from the original best block in Grampians, so a very old clone.
Yep.
Clone that's not really identified anymore as somewhere in Europe, and it's quite a unique clone, but also something that I get excited about when I think that we're bringing something back into the soil here that potentially came into Geelong back in the 1840s and 1850s.
Gosh, that's nearly 200 years ago.
A while, yeah. So, and then just surrounding the backside of our buildings on this side, we've got really tiny little Bordeaux planted blocks. So, majority of that vineyard, it's only 3 acres, probably 15 rows of Merlot, a couple of different clones, 5 rows of Cabernet Franc, which really does do well in this region. And then some Cabernet Sauvignon, a couple of rows.
So do you make a Bordeaux blend with
we
those?
do.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So it's generally Merlot Cab Franc Cab Sav or Cab Franc Merlot Cab Sav. You can't, well, I would argue, other juices may differ, but Cabernet Sauvignon is very marginal here in Geelong, so it's not really seeing any sort of straight varietal Cabernets. Looks great on the vine, crops really nicely, but just never really get it to ripeness, so it's just a blending grape for
Cool.
that one. And then just on the front of that block, Pinot Gris, so that was sort of the new up-and-comer back when we planted that block in 2008, and that was, Pinot Gris, the next big thing, especially seeing the success.
You were right.
Yeah. Well, I think Mornington on the other side,
right.
directly across the water, taught us that Pinot Gris was going to be a thing, and they planted frantically, and we followed suit on this side. So 30 acres total here on this property, though we purchased another farm about 11 kilometres from here. That little town is Mannering, again, nothing there, so probably closer to Drysdale if you're trying to associate it. So it'd be 11 k's from here as the crow flies. And we started establishing the vineyard there in 2016, and year on year we've actually continued to sort of keep that in a kind of constant state of change.
And they've got the same grapes over there?
Same grapes, yep. So again, majority Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, a lot of Pinot Gris, a tiny little bit of Merlot. We've got some Cab Franc. The whole idea over there, which is now that vineyard's probably 70 acres under vine, is trying to sort of keep it in a constant change of, constant state of change, just trying to stay on top of trends and try and keep not only the hero varieties of the region, but plant varieties that give us options in the winery.
Yes.
And it's probably not something that people think of enough.
When did they establish the winery?
So first crush was 2005. Original idea was just, a vineyard and potentially just a old homestead which was on the property, and sort of have a galley kitchen for an Airbnb. And Bernard at the time was still living in Hong Kong.
Oh, right.
And selling our fruit to two different producers in Geelong, and getting some wine made, and just came to a point where it was like, let's approach this a bit more professionally and create a brand and seek distribution and start getting the wine out there. So I think I started here in 2009 vintage, after some time at Scotchman's Hill. That's what brought me to the region. We made 600 or 700 cases that year, and now we're anywhere between 8,000 and 12,000.
Wow, that's quite a good jump, yeah.
So a bit of wine to sell each year.
That's great. What's the little train? Do you do train rides or is it for show?
They do occasionally. But Bernard and Liz Hooley, who own this property, and the other one, very artistic and see things quite differently, as you can see. It's a pity.
Well, they're creative, and wine fits into that.
So the public spaces, or just, are just Liz's art boards. So she's always coming up with a new idea for something. The train was actually the original train from the 2000 Olympics.
Oh, wow! Like around Homebush or something?
Yes.
Oh, right.
And Bernard saw it up there when he was doing something and decided to bring it down. So it's just been painted up again, but they use that shed for weddings and functions and stuff, the restaurants on site, and yeah, they do. We've used the train.
So how did the upside down house cellar door come about? Like, was that...
I hope I get this right. I believe Liz and Bernard were travelling in California around wineries and saw something similar. I have been shown a photo of something similar. When we opened up everything here, we had a very small sort of bar cellar door which was attached to our restaurant at the time. Restaurant opened in 2004, so as I said, we planted here in 2001. So 2011 we built that space, and yes, it is different. Yes, it's quite unique to look at.
It's awesome. And I read that you had a Len Evans scholarship.
I did.
Yes,
yeah.
And so tell us about that.
Best ever.
Because it was only
Best
a dozen people get chosen.
That's right. Yeah. I've been fortunate with a few things. So that was, 6 years ago now, 2018. And Len Evans Scholarship, I mean, any of your listeners out there don't know much about it. It's basically billed as the best school in the world, I think, for wine enthusiasts or from any sort of walk of life in the wine industry. So, and each year 12 people get offered a scholarship fully funded to go to the Hunter Valley, and you have a week of wine immersion, I guess, so judging, masterclasses, dinners, where you basically get to taste in a great environment too, a bunch of other people that have the same sort of enthusiasm for wine, the best wines you'll ever taste in your life.
Oh, how fantastic.
And not only the best wines, the best vintages of those wines, so that takes it up even another notch. And a lot of those wines now are totally out of reach. We'll never get to taste them again. And then you end up with, 11 best friends for life that experience that week with you, and hopefully then use probably some of that knowledge to go out and start judging wine shows and sort of contributing back to the industry, which is what I'm pretty keen on. Yeah, so and I still do that
for
too.
You, yeah.
Always doing a few shows each year, and I also run the local growers show here in Geelong too. So try and bring judges from outside the region to have a look at what we're all doing and create a bit of interest in the wines.
Yeah, and do you think Geelong, it's like a bit of a hidden gem, sort of, I think, yeah. So it's starting to get more popular, you're noticing more tourists coming? And
it's an interesting one because, when I first came to Geelong, there would have been probably 2 cellar doors open on the peninsula. So that would have been Bellarine Estate and Scotchman's Hill. Mm-hmm. And then there was one, Moorabool, which would have been Peterbell, and mainly weekend trade too.
Yes.
But there wasn't the number of people on the peninsula and in Geelong at that time. It's changed dramatically in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
But also wine tourism, proximity to accommodation, all those things have changed. So now, for us to have a restaurant and a cellar door open 7 days a week all year round, is something I thought we would never achieve. And we're not the only one. There's probably half a dozen on the peninsula doing the same. But just on it, the other thing with Geelong, when we talk about Geelong wine being a hidden gem, is that 500,000 people that live in this region permanently, plus the tourists, are very parochial and very interested in their own products.
That's so good.
Wine or food or whatever. So you end up with, of the 55 growers in the region, majority don't sell wine outside this region, ever, because they don't need to.
Wow.
And even a producer of our size, we don't have any distribution. Everything is direct from this property here, and majority of it is sold to Victoria and again into Geelong. So we're sort of, caught in a situation where we take our wines to Melbourne or Sydney, and people, I don't know anything about Geelong, or I've only seen a few producers, or I know your wine but I don't know theirs, and that's simply because we sell it all direct from our cellar doors, and it's quite unique. It's a great situation to be in because it's a really nice way to do business. But on the flip side, maybe we're not screaming the words of this wine growing region as broadly as other regions are.
Yeah.
So it's good and bad, but look, I'd have it this way over the other every single day of the week.
Family friendly?
Very much so.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're a parent, you can sort of see what people need. If kids are made to feel comfortable, or parents with kids are made to feel comfortable, they generally stay and they generally buy wine or spend. If you're not made comfortable, it could be in any retail situation.
Yep.
You go, maybe I don't need this today, and you wander out. So it's about making people happy that they visit. There's a lot of competition, even though that competition brings more people to the region because they have choice. And I think wine still is one of those experiences where if you have a fond memory of an experience somewhere, and the experience at the home or the source of that wine should be better than anywhere else. Hopefully you take that memory with you and you will remember the brand. You may not remember the actual wine, but you'll still remember that brand fondly, and you'll become a bit of an ambassador, hopefully. So.
Yep.
And then we went into the cellar door.
Plenty of Shiraz in the shed at the moment. What else can we do with that block, So, and then you start going, well, let's do this. And one year you'll still make your premium Shiraz, make a second label Shiraz, just with, less oak, etc., and make it younger and fresher and release it earlier. Allocate a bunch of rosé base as Shiraz, instead of, say, Bordeaux varieties or Pinot Noir. Then allocate some Shiraz to something like this, a field blend, which is, unoaked, fresh, bright. Probably those sort of gateway wines for the young kids that like those low alcohol, bright, fresh things. And that's blended with a little bit of Merlot. And then do a barrel selection and take some barrels and traditional ferment those. So you end up with 5 wines hitting the market effectively at the same time, all from the same couple of blocks instead of 1 or 2.
Yes. And so the difference between the white label and the blue label
So
is...
white label they're all the single blocks, so I guess they're the ones we would consider that we work harder on, but they're also generally from the older blocks on the property that we think perform best. Most of them have names, so family names, so as you can see, sort of Matilda and Jessica and Peter and William.
What are the big sellers?
No, it depends on the market. So, we would sell more non-vintage sparkling than anything else across the board year in, year out, and that's, like I said, it's the right price point. It's been in the market for a long time, and look, I don't really see huge competition in the region for a $25 sparkler. The premium sparklings, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Rosé, Sauvignon, Pinot Gris, they're all pretty big. And even our blue label entry level Shiraz is strong. Again, that's price point driven. But right now, the biggest pressure we have on anything is Chardonnay. Cannot make enough Chardonnay.
Really? That's great.
It is. Entry level Chardonnay 2023 is gone. Effectively.
Wow.
So we removed it from here and we'll soon remove it from wholesale. And that's the 2023 Lears.
Yep.
Which we're just sailing through that vintage too. And it just shows that there's been a real switch from Shiraz to Chardonnay. So we went back 6 or 7 years, we could not make enough Shiraz.
Wow.
It was almost laughable to think that we couldn't, and we would be out of the room Shiraz halfway through the year, and then we're thinking, right, we've got to try and work out how to fix this, either increase the price point or make more, and then it's been turned on its head in 5 years, and now it's Chardonnay. So, talking about flexibility in your vineyard, you don't ever know what's coming.
So what other cellar doors to visit? If you're after some views, then Jack Rabbit is a must. If you've got kids, take them along to Basil Farm. For more suggestions, I would suggest heading to Travelling Corkscrew blog, as the writer Casey lives in the region and she spends her weekends visiting all the local wineries and sharing her suggestions. It's a wealth of information. What are the other things to see or do? If you're staying in Geelong, you must do a walk along the waterfront. There's over 100 painted bollards that were painted back in the 1980s by artist Jan Mitchell. A more adult-only fun experience is lunch on the Q train, departing the town of Drysdale. It travels across the Bellarine and the Otways, offering multi-course meals paired with drinks. So some quick stats on the region. The Bellarine Peninsula is about 30 minutes from Geelong. And Geelong is about an hour to an hour and a half from Melbourne by car. The great thing about this region is you can also visit it by ferry. There's a passenger-only ferry from Docklands in Melbourne. And then when you get to the Bellarine Peninsula, the town of Port Arlington, you can grab a wine tour from there. Or you can get the car ferry from the Mornington Peninsula, which makes it perfect tripping around both peninsulas and to Melbourne without having to backtrack. For accommodation, there are several boutique hotels in the area. The Port Arlington Grand Hotel has been recently refurbished and has food, music, local events, as well as accommodation. And if you've got kids, there's also a Big 4 holiday park. Don't forget to try the Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and the medium bodied Shiraz. Until next time, happy wine travels.
Thank you so much for listening. You can subscribe now to get each episode as they drop. You can also check out this podcast on YouTube and see pictures of the region and the people I've spoken to. Go to winederlust.com.au, that's winederlust.com.au for everything discussed today. You can also subscribe to my newsletter to hear all about my upcoming events and other news. Till next time, happy wine travels.